We are so glad you are here with us today, and just by showing up, you are already demonstrating your very own smarts. Today, I am pleased to feature two amazing women to the show. One is very well known throughout the music industry. The other is on the rise, and you'll be able to say you learned about her just as her startup was getting ready to explode. Both are the precise example of what I try to deliver each and every time: over the top, smart people who have something to say. I am beyond thrilled to present these two stars to you today, and I promise you will leave here smarter and more inspired than you arrived. Before we get started, please let me take care of some business. First, to the audience, please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat of the Zoom. The reason we do these webinars is twofold. We want to showcase really smart people and the amazing work that they do day to day in the music industry. The second reason is a bit more nuanced. Many of you may know that I am a music industry headhunter. I place music executives in roles throughout the industry. So by definition and function, I help people connect with companies. In this series, my goal is to help you make more connections, and I invite you to take full advantage of that opportunity. Specifically, as I said, please engage with the speakers and the other attendees in the chat. Please introduce yourselves, share your LinkedIn profile, say hello to your friends, and make some new ones. And ask questions of our speakers. We will try to address as many of those along the way as possible. And please make sure your chat is set to address everyone, not just the speakers. I want to thank our program sponsors, for without their support, we could not keep this series free. Special thanks to First Horizon Bank, Turnkey ZRG, Four Roses Bourbon, the Tennessee Entertainment Commission, Tennessee Brew Works, Project Music, and Cushmaster's brand of CBD products. I also want to introduce a brand new sponsor to our lineup, MedJet. MedJet is the top-rated medical transport and travel security program for people who travel extensively. It provides insurance coverage that gets you to the nearest hospital if needed and gets you home. MedJet is travel protection elevated. Also want to extend a special thank you to my friend and smartest people in the room, alumnus, David Hazen, for pulling together today's program. Thanks, David. I owe you one. So let's get down to business. In today's host seat, we welcome Hilary Rosen. Hilary is vice chair of SKDK, is one of the country's most respected communication strategists, bringing decades of experiences to high-profile clients and causes at the intersection of media, business, and politics. Since joining SKDK in 2010, Hilary has specialized in developing and managing large-scale public affairs, issues advocacy, and reputation management solutions for corporate and nonprofit clients. SKDK has been recognized by the influential Holmes Report as North America Public Affairs Agency of the Year for 4 of the past 5 years, as well as being named its Global Public Affairs Agency of the Year. Hilary is also relied upon by clients for expertise in crisis communication and has steered SKDK to win the Crisis Communication Agency of the Year as well. Prior to joining SKDK, Hilary served as chairman and CEO of the RIAA, where she helped drive the music industry's transition to a digital marketplace and spearhead support for fair compensation for artists' rights against censorship. When she left the RIAA after 16 years in 2003, she helped launch the Washington, D.C. Bureau of the Huffington Post and served as its political director and editor at large. In her work as a consultant, she's also helped to develop intellectual property, diversity and communications policies for multiple media, tech, and entertainment clients. She currently serves on the board of trustees of Howard University, the governing board of Time's Up Now, the Center for American Progress Action Fund, and LPAC. She's also the founder and board member of Business Forward. She's a graduate of George Washington University and lives in Washington, D.C., and is the proud mom of twins. Welcome, Hilary. So glad to have you.
Thank you, Tom.
And joining Hilary as today's featured guest is Jessica Powell. Jessica is CEO and co-founder of Audio Shake, which uses AI to deconstruct songs into instrumentals and stems so they can be opened up and used for new opportunities in sync licensing, remixing, and emerging immersive education and social media formats. The company won Sony's 2021 D-Mixing Challenge, beating big tech companies, startups, and research institutes. Its technology was called the cleanest stem separation tech by DJ Mag. In just 6 months since its launch, the company already counts all the major labels, most top publishers, and a wide range of independent labels and artists among its customers. Jessica spent over a year at Google, where she sat on the company's management team, reporting into the CEO, and ran the company's global communications organization. She began her career at CISAC, the International Society of Authors and Composers in Paris, France, and during her career has worked across fields of marketing, communications, product management, and policy. She's also the author of a nonfiction book called Literary Paris and a novel called The Big Disruption, a totally fictional but essential true Silicon Valley story. Her essays, opinion pieces, and short stories have been published in the New York Times, Time Magazine, The Guardian, Fast Company, and many other places. She speaks 5 languages and has lived in over 10 countries. She currently lives in San Francisco. Clearly, folks, these are the 2 smartest people in this room today, and I could not be happier to present them to you. Please take it away, Hilary.
Thank you, Tom. As long as that's a day-by-day analysis, we're good. Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to be here. Obviously, I've been a fan of what Tom's been doing here for a while, but I'm really here because Jessica Powell is, somebody I have known, not really for that long, but admire her so much. Our dear friend Kara Swisher introduced us a few years ago and said, you two are like comms people who are really not comms people, and you need to know each other. And I have found that to be true. Jessica, you are a comms person, but boy, now you are an entrepreneur. You're a Renaissance woman. I'm loving Audio Shake. I love the idea. Tell us about what it does and how you created it.
Yeah, so Audio Shake at its simplest, what it does is it can take any recording from any point in time, even mono track, so even music from the 20s, 30s, and so forth, and pull it apart into its constituent parts, which we know as stems or instrumentals. And it's very simple. You simply upload the song and it splits it apart in a matter of seconds. We started the company in 2020, but the idea for it actually began a long time ago. When we were sitting here, Tom was asking me about languages, and I mentioned Japanese, and the reason for that was I lived in Japan for a couple of different times, and you don't live in Japan for a long time without getting dragged to a lot of karaoke, like a lot. And it's amazing. It's a wonderful experience. But the problem is that you have these like 500 songs, and it's the same 500 songs wherever you go. And you can't do all the songs you want. And when you do them, they're not always like the versions of the songs you want. They're not the originals. And my co-founder, Luke, both of us were big punk fans. And we just really wanted to like do a really amazing rendition of like a Gang of Four song. And you can't, because that's not what they cover. So you do Brown Eyed Girl and you do Wonderwall, all of which is great. But we were
Sweet
like,
Caroline.
what if you
do Sweet Caroline.
Sweet Caroline, definitely Sweet Caroline. But like, we were just like, what if you could have karaoke for everything? And that was probably a conversation that started maybe 10 years ago. And then with time passing, then we started to say, gosh, what if you could just sample everything? And both of us around the same time left our jobs. Luke was the head of data science at Plaid, which is a fintech company out here. I was at Google, and we both left. And I think we both knew that we wanted to get back into doing something more creative. Both of us play instruments and have always been really, really passionate about music. And that was sort of a natural area that we gravitated towards when we were still just kind of playing around with ideas of what we might do next. And Audio Shake was born out of that.
What right now, this kind of market feels a little bit like the Wild West to me. When I was at RA, there were so many different sites and so many different opportunities that, almost all of them unlicensed, but getting your arms around it to do that, to get high quality audio, to get real good music, even, good karaoke, just the melodies was like impossible. Tell us a little bit about the market and why kind of legitimizing this market the way you are doing matters in terms of kind of growth for for the industry?
Yeah. Well, let me try and be concise because I have so many different thoughts about it, and I'll
Yeah.
probably go in different directions.
It's big. There's a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I think here's the thing. I think that everyone's stems are going to be out there. Most people's stems are already out there.
Yep.
And if they're not out there, they can be out there. There's a ton of software out there that you can use of varying degrees of quality that will break a song apart.
Just so we're all on the same page, define for
Yeah.
the audience what you consider to be a STEM, just to make sure everybody gets the reference.
Right. So yeah, probably because we have different people. I won't get too much into the audio engineering versions of it. I'll just say that if you have, we have a song, and what our software or other software can do is pull that song into the vocal stem, which would be the collection of all the vocals, the drums, the guitar. And so you have a stem for each of those parts. And then that allows you to manipulate the song at a much more like granular level, right? You can a really common use case and a big issue for a lot of publishers or sync departments is not having the instrumental, right? So you can only, and if you're doing a commercial or a movie and you are the music supervisor and the sound editor, you want to be able to turn that vocal down so that you're retaining the mood of that song, but it's not distracting from, say, what the actor is saying on stage. And so it's the different parts of the song. And most sound separation technologies right now can separate between two stems, so a cappella and instrumental, which of course instrumental isn't really technically a stem, but we refer to it that way. An a cappella and instrumental through to 4 stem, 5 stem, and a few more. We do right now 6 stem separation. We're about to release our 7th, and we're working on others as well. So, you know, I think everyone's stems are going to be out there. And I also think that we're eventually going to end up in another Napster type era where there's going to be the thing where people are saying, do we go after this? Do we litigate all this stuff? Do we try and stop it? I think that kind of stuff is very hard to stop, right? On the other hand, like I would encourage people to look at it as a massive opportunity, because I think that what is both, from my perspective, unfortunate and wonderful is that music is becoming far more ubiquitous than it was before. I think one of the jargon terms I've heard that makes sense is kind of music as a feature, right? This idea that music's going to be all around us. And as we move in different environments, and we're in AR and VR and immersive environments, or maybe where we are listening to the full song, or maybe we're in like a gaming platform and we're listening to music, and the music isn't even hard coded in the way it is today in games, but rather it's changing every time we enter that same scene, or the different parts of the scene itself are changing based on how our character interacts with them. So many of those experiences are going to be built on stems. And so many of those experiences, it's actually far more opportunities than exist today for artists, right? There's going to be so many more buckets for them to pull from. But so many of those experiences are going to be built with the idea that you can manipulate audio at the most atomic level possible. And I think we are very much going to be in a world 5 years from now where we interact with audio on social platforms, whether that's TikTok or whatever the TikTok of the future is, where users can manipulate and change and interact and customize and throw themselves into that audio with the same ease that they do that today with video and image. And so, you know, the way we approached this when we went into it was, how can we help the industry in the first instance get the stems and arm them with all of these assets that they might not necessarily have, so they can start to do and really engage with all these really, really cool uses. And so that, yes, all the stuff that's happening out there with other kinds of software, it's going to continue. And I think it's going to be very hard to stop potentially. But meanwhile, yes, people can be exploring stuff. Yeah.
It's just on that point about how you actually get started in this. One of the things that would, you know, people I think on this show realize that one of the reasons the music industry was so late to the game in distributing digital music was because they literally had no systematic way to access their catalogs. And whether that was full songs or samples or anything. And so they were literally, as you know, Napster was in full force, they were building databases from scratch and trying to, you know, figure out even where the master recording was housed, because half the master recordings were, in warehouses somewhere and had never been digitized. And so this kind of notion of a service that actually goes into the labels, big and small, and develops their stems for them. I mean, that in and of itself is just huge value add, I think, for companies. And are you getting a lot of reception around that?
Yeah, it's been really great. Coming out in the Valley, when we started working in music, I have to say that a lot of folks in tech were just like, what are you doing?
Right.
Like, do not do a music tech company. Like, it's so difficult to work with the music industry, so on and so forth.
Those people are crazy.
Yeah, there was definitely like, they're crazy and they're going to screw you over and they're so difficult to work with. And I don't know, there was just part of me that's like, yeah, but kind of the playbook in the Valley has been go out, infringe everyone's content, pretend that you're not, and then start talking to people once you're sued. Like, is it so crazy that the relationship might not be super friendly when that's how you started the relationship?
Right.
So, I went into that. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I went into it with a lot of trepidation, but people have been fantastic. And guess what? Like, if you go to people saying, hey, we have this thing and we actually think it can help you make more money, and here, try it. Like, we're not selling you snake oil, try it, make sure you like it. Things go pretty well, so it's been great. It's been really wonderful working with people, and people are so wonderful in giving us feedback and telling us places we can improve and stuff. Yeah.
I want to talk a little more about this kind of relationship between tech and music, because you have been on both sides and there aren't that many people who have. But there is this kind of folklore about how difficult people in the music business are. And this quick funny story, when it was many years ago, like 1977, I think, when I was first going into the music business with Jay Berman, who at the time was the head of RIAA, and he was bringing me in as his number two. And he was working for Steve Ross, who was the head of Warner's at the time. He had essentially created Warner Communications at the time. And he went to Steve and said, I'm leaving because I'm going to go run the RIAA. And Steve said, what do you want to go to the music business for? Those people are so slimy and awful to work with. And Jay said to Steve, you own the biggest record company in the world. And he said, I know, that's how I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think the whole system is very messed up. And I think everyone plays a part in its greatness and in its problems, right? In the sense of what is a little difficult, I think, and where I am sympathetic. So let me just give you a couple examples. So if you're a startup today, and this isn't what we do, like I have no skin in the game on this, but like if you're a startup today and you want to license music, so you're building, I don't know, fitness, you've got some kind of cool usage that you're doing.
Yeah.
You want to get music. You do not have the resources to go and talk to all the majors, plus the biggest publishers. You probably are a handful of people, most likely engineers. You don't have the ops, the legal, the budget to do any of that. And so then you sit there, and music's at the core, like a core part of that experience, may not be the thing. And so you're like, well, what do you do? Because there aren't a lot of Feed FM has actually been great in solving part of this, but like there aren't a lot of places for you to go to be able to solve, to get that sort of turnkey. And I think those kind, and if you're on the label side or the publisher side, you don't have the ROI in dealing with an app that's probably going to fail within the next year. Like, that doesn't make sense either. So I think it's really hard from a startup perspective sometimes to get going with those kinds of things.
True, but
at the same time, I think it's,
Yeah, I was going to say the interesting thing about that is, in so many ways, the music community gets a bad rap for that, but that is purely a function of the antitrust laws, where, the Justice Department has never let all of these organizations get together and have single licensing and have, the ability to make it easier.
Right. Like a one-stop shop, which would be amazing.
It is true that in the old days, like these companies and these writers, they were hesitant. They didn't want to license anything. They didn't want to, cannibalize what they thought were, their bread and butter for years and record sales. But once that was over, which at this point was a long time ago, there still weren't that many great options, literally because of antitrust. And so in some respects that has, that reputation inures to the detriment of the people in the music business, but it's not their fault.
Right. Well, and like another, like something that comes, like, I think that it is closer to our business that I'm very, like empathetic towards is I like the way remixes work. Right. And you probably have more insight into this, but from a sort of outsider's perspective, you look at remixes drive are so, and I think this has really shifted, right, in the past 5-10 years, but remixes are so wonderful for driving the life cycle, like extending the life cycle of a song, increasing its relevance. But the remixer, and that could be the bedroom producer, right, like goes through all these kinds of acrobatics to try and get at some sort of sample or some sort of, at the acapella stem or whatever it might be. And they might use means of doing that the label and the artist would not appreciate, but they got it. And now they've created it. And now they've uploaded it to SoundCloud. And probably statistically, that remix is probably only going to get like, I don't know, a couple hundred, couple thousand views. No one cares. It's not detected, right? The artist doesn't get paid for it. Then occasionally you have the remix that like goes, crazy and does really, really well. And all of a sudden the remixer, the rights holder might swoop in and claim it, which is their right to do. And that way the artist is also getting paid. The remixer doesn't necessarily get anything out of that because they didn't have the license to do that in the start. And so like you look at all of that and you're like, wow, there's a whole long tail of remixes that aren't getting monetized or detected. Yeah. There's a whole, so there's so many different examples of where all different sort of parts of the ecosystem, and because sometimes of certain externalities, like you were saying, like antitrust, everything's kind of been set where the incentives it doesn't entirely make sense, but you understand how it got there. And so you can get kind of depressed about it when you're trying to think about how to build a music business that's responsible, right, but that is also creating. And I think that's also why a lot of things, sometimes some of the infringement, kind of the origin stories of some of the tech companies, they're not great. At the same time, they did shift the industry and move and open up new uses. And so I think I have very complicated feelings about it all, but I think it's also exciting. Like when there's that many problems and broken things, it can also kind of inspire you to come up with ideas for it. Right.
Right. Let's go back then, because I mean, you are, most recently you've been in the tech industry. You wrote a really great book. I recommend it to everybody, a zany kind of satire of the tech industry called The Big Disruption. But you started your career in music licensing at CSAC in Paris, which is, for those of you who don't know, is the sort of global music rights organization outside the US. So that kind of gave you an early appreciation for licensing and sort of this complex world.
Yeah, I started at CSAC, which I think in English maybe is referred to differently. So you guys say CSAC for the US one, and anyway, so I apologize if I'm confusing
CSAC.
CSAC.
Like Barbra Streisand. It's ZZAC.
CSAC, and I just can't. So I've too long spent saying it the other way. So CSAC in Paris, I started there, and I can't pretend at 24 or 23, the age I was at, that I had some huge passion or awareness of copyright, and that was like the thing I wanted to do. No, I had gotten to Paris, had saved up my money to go abroad, and I tried to find any job I could. And I happened to fit the exact specifications of what they were looking for at the time. But it ended up being an incredible experience, because there I was having just come out of college and fully, right, taking advantage of P2P networks and all of those kinds of things. And never once, because I was a kid, right, I never thought about the artist, right? I was very much just like, oh, I should, I want this song. And then going and working the complete opposite side of it and going to CSAC, and all of a sudden being fully immersed in the full range of those concerns, and not just the impact that piracy has on the artist, but even bigger questions around, like, one of the things I found fascinating sitting in Europe was, what is the impact of American music and cultural exports on local cultural ecosystems, right? When, and what happens to the diversity of that local content when say there, aren't safeguards in place to make sure that that local content is still being promoted and supported by the government and by other entities, things that never would have occurred to me. And so, I think,
And in
but the thing that
Europe,
was
songwriters and artists actually copyright, they have much more power than they've always
right.
had.
Well, and there's the moral right too, right?
Right.
Yeah. And so it was such an eye-opening experience. And I think that was the thing that when I went on and then started working in tech, that I had never felt great about, which was just that it felt like you always think of the content first and the users first and the artist last. And then it was kind of like, well, look, we drove a billion views, 1 million views, whatever it is of your content. Isn't that great marketing for you?
Right.
Yeah. And then many months later, years later, and then here's the revenue split. Right. And like, it just never felt like it came from a place of how do you respect what artists want, and how do you respect, and how do you make sure that they're paid fairly from the start. And I think all those issues are very clearly still very central today. I just think that we don't really think about creators first. And when we do think about them, we tend to think about them as commodities. And I think that's just it's an unfair way to think about it. But it's also it feels particularly, I don't know, this is a very almost violent from I just think about it from as an author. I'm a crap musician. I am a musician, but I'm very bad. I think about it from a novelist point of view. And you have this tie, I have a tie to my work, my written, the written word that I would say goes far beyond the work that I do in Audio Shake, though I love it, right? But there's this vulnerability that's tied to that work. And when someone starts, if I think it stems,
you own it, it's yours.
Totally.
You want
and
it.
if people start transforming that and doing all those things, and so I just think when I think of our work at Audio Shake, it's really important to me that we always respect what what creators in particular and the rights holders want us to do or not do with their work. And I think remixes and this atomization of music is going to be really fantastic for artists on the whole in terms of monetization for them and revenue. Right. But I think it would be particularly good if it could be done in a way that's respectful and that allows people who don't want to be a part of it to not be a part of it.
And that's really important. Michelle Schacht, great artist herself, is in the
Michelle Schacht is there?
Yeah. And, she's talking about remixes being an exploitation unless there's permission and engagement. And I think as much as artists want the money and deserve the money, there's also this sense of violation that happens.
Yeah, which I understand that.
On a sound quality basis and on a, tearing apart basis, a remix basis. And so that kind of control, that sense of control is something that artists have never felt and always sought. From the moment a song goes out into the, out into the world, you are at your most vulnerable and, least valuable in a way. It's only valuable financially if somebody wants to hear it over and over and over again. And that's when you end up being most vulnerable financially, because of course that's when people want to take it and use it free in other ways. And so that sense of personal ownership is really important, that you guys are focused on that at Audio Shake. What talk a little bit about your experience on the indie artist side and how you've been looking at that market, because you've got a bunch of deals with majors, and obviously this is so much bigger than just the music. There.
Yeah. I need to get over the fact that Michelle Schacht is watching this. I can't now look at the chat, by the way, because if Michelle Schacht was getting angry at me, now it's just I'm going to be I just can't look. So if anyone mentions anything in the chat that I should ever look at it, just know I'm not looking from the past 10 minutes. I'll look at it later from 10 minutes down.
I think she's happy with what you're saying.
Okay. All right. Great.
It's respectful and real. Yeah.
The indie artist.
I guess she'll tell us at some point. Oh, there she goes. Now she's laughing. She's got it. You got it.
Great.
Don't worry.
Wonderful. Indie artists. We do a terrible job serving indie artists, which kills us because all of us, I think that's sort of the community that we're most connected to, just in terms of us being musicians ourselves. Right now, what we do is when indie artists come to us, I should say we serve indie labels. We have some great indie label clients that range from CD Baby and Mute and Cherry Red and Cleopatra and lots of indies. But in terms of the individual artists, they come to us and over email, and they'll send us their songs. It's a terrible system. Like, we send it back to them. Like, so we are working on something that will be self-serve for them at price points that work for them. That'll come later this month. I hope sometime this quarter. Yeah, it's very messy trying to do this the right way. I will say, trying to, how do you create a technology that you want to be open and accessible to everyone, because it's so important to you that you're serving the artists in their, bedroom working, as well as a full professional operation happening over here. And how do you build that in a way? And I'm sure, along the way, we're going to get things wrong, but we're trying to do it the right way. And so, yeah, we're very excited to be able to give something to indie artists that just lets them get essentially like the same technology as everyone else and be able to use it on their songs.
Mm-hmm. How, tell us about, just talk money for a couple of minutes. What do you, as you started out saying that there really is, or maybe I said it and you agreed, this wild west out there of people using pieces of music across the board for all sorts of things. So what's the size of the legitimate market in your view? Like, what's the, why go into this business? Obviously you think that there's a real business here.
I do think there's a real business here, but I think I would be lying. If there's a venture capitalist on the call, I think it's a huge business. It's like $500 trillion. But look, the truth of the matter is, I don't think people go, I don't think you go into music tech, right? When you're if you have the engineering or the AI skills to be able to build this big business, and you're looking at all the opportunities out there, like, probably the smarter business thing to do is, like, I don't know, build the calendar optimization tool, or, some product that people are using every day for productivity, or a payment system, or I don't know, go into crypto. Why not? So I think that, yes, I think there's a business here, but our starting point was just like, there were uses out there for music that we saw and that we desired, and that we knew we weren't alone in wanting that. And that we also, from the perspective of everyone on the team has again, no one's professional, but we have engineers who are also producers. We have AI researchers who play multiple instruments. I think everyone saw the utility in what we were doing for their own personal work and for others. And we really wanted to make that accessible. So that absolutely was the departure point, like I said. And me, very selfishly, I still just want to karaoke to Gang of Four, right? Like, $1 billion business and Gang of Four karaoke. But I think,
like you talked about, Japan and other parts of Asia, I mean, where karaoke actually is a $1 billion business.
Oh, huge. Well, and I think karaoke, I think there's so many opportunities. So if I was trying to size the market, look, I think the easiest one is to look at something like the gaming market, right? Which I haven't even looked at figures for that recently, but if you just looked at music and gaming, I feel like I'm going to get this totally wrong, and there'll be someone on the call that actually will know this because they actually look at it. But I don't know. I feel like I saw something. It just music and gaming alone was like a $40 billion industry. That is probably totally wrong. But gaming is obviously massive.
It's huge.
Gaming is massive. And when you think about music, what I think is super interesting about music and gaming is something called adaptive music. So that's the idea that the music is changing as you're moving through an environment. And that could be in fitness, right? Where you have started listening to an Ariana Grande song, and then you're walking, and then you're running, and the song shifts, not just in BPM, but almost genre shifts, right? And on the, and then if you think of music and gaming, that opportunity that I mentioned earlier, that music is no longer this hard-coded thing where it's, when you start at level 2, you have this song, and when you have 60 seconds left, the speed increases to give you that sense of urgency, but rather that it's super dynamic. And you could almost imagine that entire environment being pulled apart down to the, like into the stem level, right? So that you're hearing almost the parts of a song as you,
Right.
I think there's a lot of actually kind of interesting future looking music experiences that are almost like some kind of psychedelic trip, right? Where like the flowers are talking to you and they're doing different, like a different sonic things and so forth. Anyway, so the market is very large. If you just looked at karaoke, I think karaoke is like supposed to be a $5 billion business in a couple of years. So there's different slices of it that at
And
some
the
point in time I had to
interplay
look at.
between gaming and social has now obviously that,
Right.
it's a big.
Yeah.
Okay, gear switch, because we have a question for both of us from Emmanuel Legrand.
We work together at CZAC.
For you, he wants to know whether you signed an NDA with Google. And I guess that's because he wants to know if you can tell us something about Google that we don't know. And I'll narrow it for him and say about how Google sees kind of the music space and how they started, because there were so many fights early on in the music business and with the music business, and you were there for a lot of those fights.
Yeah. Did I sign an NDA with Google? I mean, I think part of your contract is an NDA. But no, I think, so obviously I've been out of Google for four years now, so I can't remotely speak about how they think about it right now. I think that it absolutely changed over the years. I do think, and this would apply to every tech company, not every, quite a few tech companies back in like the mid 2000s, post iPhone into like the early teens of the 2000s. I think what I was saying earlier, this general feeling that the industry is very difficult to work with. All right, no, here, wait, let's no, let's be very, like I can be very honest about this. What do I think the industry, like, what do I think generally?
Don't be honest.
No, here we go. So like, I think that generally people feel like that, that the industry talks out of both sides of their mouth, that there is a conversation where on the one hand, there's upset about not being paid for content. That seems justified to me. If you're not being paid for your content, like that you'd be upset about it, makes sense. But then on the one hand, there's like upset about, not being paid. And then on the other hand, wanting all of the toys that possibly, even when those systems aren't in place or whatever it might be. I think, again, from a distance, I feel like some of that's happening with some of the newer platforms and so forth. I don't know where, so I think there's just this feeling that it's difficult, and that, and I remember on YouTube, there was the case where one label, I think, was like posting videos of, like the marketing department would be posting videos to YouTube while the legal department was like, upset with YouTube, like that existing and that kind of thing.
That happened a lot.
So I think right. And I think that happened across like multiple people. And it all kind of makes sense. It makes perfect sense to me that existed, right? Like different departments, different focus. The marketing folks are like, where do we go that there's growth, that there's engagement with our content? And the legal folks are like, that's our content. Pay us for our content. So, I think there's just a general thing that it's very difficult. I think the other thing that is very much that you hear a lot out here, again, none of this is specific to Google, I would say, which is not me trying to avoid the Google thing. I just think that's what the general feeling is just the general lack of transparency, right? That contracts aren't transparent, rev splits aren't transparent. And so, who's taking the lion's share of things? Do artists understand where different monies are, coming? I think there's a feeling that there's that platforms are operating on pretty small margins and pressure for more money, like that could be hard to turn around. But I think that's probably the kind of general chatter you hear. But I'm somewhat disconnected to all that now because I'm not running a massive, social media site or whatever. So,
right.
Yeah, I don't know what the current thought is.
Well, I think that kind of level of dismissiveness around the piece and kind of resentment for the desire for control still really does exist in that relationship.
Yes.
Between.
I think that yes, that's a great point. Yeah.
I think people sort of underappreciate still in the tech space how holistic a view about this is. How, it's not just YouTube not paying artists, although obviously that has been a significant problem over the years, but it's also that, the crappiest videos of their work end up on there without any kind of control. And, the day that they could barely sing from a live show, gets overdubbed on something else. I mean, like whatever the example is,
Right.
It feels like such a personal affront. And I think that, in the tech space, it's like almost like, well, let's just shave all this code here, all this code there. And, whatever you've done is sort of irrelevant. We're going to take it over. But maybe they're more used to that in the tech space. But,
I think
artists have never been used to that. They've always been used to kind of being able to control their creative output. And so that level of disregard for that has always been a really sore spot.
I think the thing is, I hadn't really thought about it this way until you were talking. I think what's interesting is that when you were dealing with things at like this high up and you're looking at millions, billions pieces of content, you can only look at it in those terms, pieces of content, right? The data points. And yet the artistic act is fundamentally an individual act, even if it's performed collaboratively, right? Like it's this singular thing that is very unique in what it is, and certainly is very unique in terms of how the participants who created it think of it, right? So they're like fundamentally different worldviews.
Right.
And I think that, and I don't know the perfect way that you balance that, right? I always want us to be on the side of like creators and artists. Building platforms, I understand the difficulty in, you could build the most granular controls perhaps in the world, for example, but there will always be, for example, bad actors that will do things that will work around those controls that then mean you have the crappy video or you have things in other places. So I don't, I think it's, and the thing I should also say is I do feel like these companies have grown up, like the early days of any of the music forays, I'd say by the big tech companies were pretty sloppy, right? And they didn't have people from the industry involved, and they didn't have, certainly didn't have creators involved. And like, I think if you were to look at most of those companies now, the people that are running, that are kind of in the top ranks, looking at music and so forth, are people that come from the industry that are very sympathetic to the concerns of the industry and are trying to bridge that. So I do think it's in a different phase now.
Some of the earliest tech pioneers, I told this to you before, I have a relationship with because I sued them. Mark Cuban or Dave Goldberg, may rest in peace. Jerry Yang at, when he started Yahoo, or Travis Kalanick, or, Sean Parker. There was this kind of,
you need a woman to sue,
where they sort of all, ended up moving on to bigger and better, more profitable things. But, there were many places where people sort of tried to kind of do that steamroll. There's somebody in the chat, there's Lori Geltman's in the chat, who is an Audio Shake client and has really great things to say about Audio Shake and how, she didn't have anybody to create stems for her, and therefore couldn't make any revenue from the music, and you guys did it in 2 hours. So
that's great. That's great.
Shout out.
I remember I saw her name pop up in the chat, and I remembered because I took over, someone was working with her, and then I took over to create the stems for her. So hi, Lori. Manny had a question for me that I don't even know if I want to answer, but it's like, now that the industry is only 3 major companies, would you still run the RIA if you could? It's like, well, I left because I was unhappy, obviously, with what the industry was doing in the digital space. And it's different now. It's both too concentrated. On the other hand, as Jessica points out, the need for kind of license consolidation is so great
but obviously fewer. There's just so much less opportunity, particularly for the kind of middle class artists. So I think it would be a struggle to get these companies together and do things as an industry now in a way that there used to be a lot more kind of collaboration and engagement with each other. I think now they're just really three separate behemoths that treat it that way. Tell me a little bit about your life as you've managed this, being an entrepreneur now out of the kind of corporate world. You've got kids, you've got partners, you've got, and you've been running all of this from, your room in San Francisco or in the Valley? Are you in the Valley? San Francisco. How is that? Oh, by the way, one other thing which is relevant to this. The industry still does a terrible job of having women in the leadership. And I think that would be really hard for me at this point, to be one of the few. And I don't think they've made, hardly any progress in that in terms of real power. The same people have power today, the same women who are fantastic and friends of mine, but there's still just so few of them. And that's similar in tech. And so we see now more entrepreneurs, women entrepreneurs, and VCs specifically catering to women entrepreneurs. So talk a little bit about how you've seen that flow and what that means for you personally.
Yeah, certainly in tech, there are not that many, it's certainly not many women in leadership positions. And then if you look within the technical portions of tech, right, that tends to be under 20% of women on the engineering side. I think on the one hand, I guess I have a bunch of very, I don't know if they're necessarily conflicting, but different thoughts about it all. I don't have necessarily like a tidy bubble. I think we all go through our lives sort of wanting to be considered as individuals. And so I always chafe on some level when I'm asked to opine or to think about women as a group on some level, because I feel like you go through your day trying to not think about that. Really, you just want to interact with people as a person. And then you have these moments where you kind of bump up against a reality where all of a sudden you realize that someone is seeing you differently from that, right? That they're actually seeing you through a lens of gender or whatever it might be. And so, I think that for me, particularly sitting out in the Valley, I think where I actually spend the most time thinking about it is in relation to money, right? Which is that as bad as, say, the statistics might be in the music industry, as bad as the statistics might be in the tech, in say startups and big tech and so forth. I mean, they're really abysmal when you talk about venture capital, right? I remember, I think this is maybe from over a year or two ago, but it's something like less than 5% of venture capital goes to women. Less than 2% of it goes to Black and African American women. So less than 5%, right? Like it's extraordinary, particularly when you consider like women's purchasing power of these, right? Like it's not like we are, sitting doing our knitting and never intersecting with these companies that are getting all this funding. But then you look at who runs the venture capital firms, right? And it's generally all men. And so I think that's actually, I just tend to really think with most things, like you follow the money. And if you don't have from the start women on the cap tables that are making investments, how much hope is there for, and you could apply what I just said to, we could talk about age, we could talk about race. Those are also areas where when you look at the statistics in terms of venture capital, it looks dismal. And so for us, for example, when we were raising, it was really important to me to have lots of women on our cap table. And we have amazing women from the, in tech, but also, from the industry. We have Susie Rue from Q&A. We have Gwen Riley, who's SVP of music at Peloton.
But yeah,
but it
by
was
the way,
interesting because
to the audience, I should have disclosed this, but no reason to not feel proud about it. I'm actually an investor in Audio Shake and excited about it. I think it's got a great future, and Jessica's a great leader. Anyway, so go ahead about your.
Oh, it was just to say, I think what's just really interesting is it's always just harder, right? And what's hard and what I've found is that there are all of these wonderful, wonderful men constantly around me, helping me. And they could be helping me by giving me money. They could be helping me because they want to work with Audio Shake, and they're willing to donate time, and they're like wonderful, wonderful people. And it's very hard when you're in a startup and you have so much working against you, right? So much, like it's so hard to do a startup. And here are all these things that are right in front of you that are just right there for the taking. And then you have this moment where you're like, oh no, but I really want to go find someone that looks a little bit different, right? I really want to go find a woman. And meanwhile, there are all these people that are just giving you things right here. It's just, they all happen to look alike. And so what's hard is sometimes to say, wait, I'm going to slow things down to try and involve someone that's not in that immediate range. And that's hard. And I think but I think what happens is, sorry, this is a long answer. I'll stop in 20 seconds.
That's good, because it's really true. It
Yeah.
requires, consciousness.
Yeah. And I think what's really hard is if you don't think about it early on, the problem just perpetuates itself. So you think about hiring or something like that, and every person that you hire that looks like you makes it that much harder that the next hire doesn't look like you, because we all kind of pull from our networks. Our networks tend to look a lot like us. And you end up then in a position where one day you are a huge company and you've employed a whole bunch of people that have the same socioeconomic background, the same race, the same gender, whatever the criteria kind of might be. It's very hard, we're like, I'm the only woman on my team right now. And we're tiny. It's like a tough problem, but I think the step is just being very aware of it and trying to go further in making sure that all possible candidates for a job that you've kind of opened your doors to them and they actually know you exist, for example. And same thing with the vendors you work with and who's on your cap table and all that. It just does take more time. And the one thing I would say to folks on the call, say who might be men, you're wonderful. This is no bashing of men. Some of the best mentors in my entire career have all been men. I think that I remember when I was at Google, there was this guy, James Damore, who wrote this memo that was like that women were like biologically unsuited or less suited for the sciences or something like that.
I remember.
And I remember it caused this huge uproar. And it was funny because I had actually already quit Google. I was trying to leave and then this thing happened and I had to stick around to deal with it. And, but anyway, my inbox was flooded with all these men that were sending me emails that were like, I just want you to know, I think you're very intelligent and I think you're, and I'm really proud to have you as a coworker. And I just looked at these emails and I was like, thank you. I guess I actually just genuinely never questioned that you thought that I wasn't intelligent and that you weren't happy to be I benefited the doubt. I actually thought, but how about you just not interrupt me in that meeting? Or how about when that one opportunity comes, rather than turning to that guy that you work with all the time, you just invite me or something, and I guess my one, all this is to say is that the vast majority of men I've ever encountered in my life are wonderful and have fantastic intentions. And the thing that I would ask if they were ever trying to contribute a little more positively to the balance is the next time an opportunity kind of comes your way or that you need to recommend someone for, is if you just took an extra 20 seconds and rather than passing that opportunity to Steve, who's also great, if you just asked yourself, wait a second, is there someone that I maybe have never passed an opportunity to that looks very different from me and that I could give that opportunity to? And I think that would be pretty tremendous for everyone that's in any kind of less represented group in any industry.
I mean, I think that's so key to where we are right now. Obviously, we've had a reckoning these last 2 years. We've had a racial reckoning, we've had a gender reckoning, but you sit here today and say, all right, have we made the progress we need to make, has tech really made the progress we need to make? Are we sponsoring? Are we mentoring? Are we training? Are we engaging where we need to be with women or people of color? Somebody pointed out in the chat that only the Billboard most powerful people in the music business came out yesterday, and 3 of the top 25 are women. And my guess is that the tech numbers would look much the same, maybe even less, who knows. But the only thing we can do is those people who get a little power and get some authority to hire and to expand, is that we take on that responsibility.
Yeah.
I'm super excited about Audio Shake, obviously, since I'm an investor, but it's also so interesting. As we've seen these comments, Tom, in the chat, I know you agree that there's just such a sense of hunger for this kind of respect, this kind of legitimacy that Audio Shake offers for these pieces of music. And so that's why what Jessica's doing is so important, I think, to this audience today and really to the entire music community.
Thank you. I feel like we at some point we're going to do something wrong and so forth. And I just, but we're trying really hard, and I hope that that people will keep giving us feedback and guide. Like we did this for artists, so we hope that we can be really useful to everyone and do it the right way.
Let me just close with one more question that came up in the chat from Lori Geltman, an Audio Shake person. Jessica, could you explain the difference between your AI and other companies that are looking at doing some of the same thing, and what makes Audio Shake unique? Because you did say at the beginning, there's a lot of people doing stripping and doing other things. What makes Audio Shake's tech different and what you're doing different?
Yeah, if I was a much better salesperson, I would have worked all this in. Thank you, Lori Geltman. We've never met in person. You just set up my sales spiel.
The closing pitch.
Yeah, here we go. Okay, let's see if I can do this. Yeah, so we, I kind of want to say ours is the best. We won a contest that Sony ran last summer to find the best sound separation technology. There were a number of entrants that ranged from, say, Facebook and ByteDance, which owns TikTok, through to private research institutes and so forth. And we won, which was pretty cool for us, particularly to be able to beat big tech companies that have a ton of computing resources that can actually enter those contests again and again and again and again and again, because they have the money to do it.
Wait, give that site in case they want to look that up. It was the Sony did this contest last summer.
The Sony Demixing Challenge. If you go to this site, it's probably a little difficult to parse, just in the sense of it's listing scores and that kind of thing. But we link to it from our blog if you just do Sony Challenge and Audio Shake. But yeah, so we did win that. I think the things that are different are, one, that we have the best technology. I think there's variations depending on services in terms of the number of separations that are available. We're on the higher end of separations available. Our stuff is, I never want to say our stuff is perfect, because the moment I say that, someone's like, and what about this, but our stuff is usually able to be used in professional circumstances. So it's been in, it was in an Oreo commercial, it was in a Super Bowl commercial, it was in, I know it was delivered for a Super Bowl commercial. I don't know if and they used them, or if they just used instrumental, but it's been in a number of documentaries and podcasts, one movie, a bunch, and this is all just in the past, in the past year. And a lot of remixes. Green Day did a cool thing where they recreated their masters on TikTok so that fans could play along. So I think the quality thing is actually a pretty big differentiator, because otherwise it's, having an acapella that has a ton of artifacts, or an instrumental where you still hear a lot of bleed from the vocal, is probably not going to work if you're talking about a really high quality sound experience. And we've done a lot of work in for spatial mixes, for example. So I think quality is probably the biggest differentiator. And I'd like to think, that our approach is very different, right? That we started by not a free-for-all site where anyone could upload anything, but rather we wanted to start where we went to the industry first and gave them access. Now, when we open up to indie artists, that will be a broader access, but everything we do is still very much based on this idea of like, well, if this was our music, what would we want for it, and so I think the philosophical approach is a bit different too.
Right. Okay, great. Quick lightning round. What are you listening to this week that you love to share, so to let people know? And like, where's your favorite place to go look for new music?
Right. Okay. So, what am I listening to? With no commentary about whether or not I like it. Children have been listening to Moana in French. It's very weird. For the past like 48 hours, I've heard a lot of Moana. Right. I've been listening to two Spanish bands the past for like Mujeres, and then another one, I think he's like Tangana, something like that, are the two I've been listening to. And then Mon Laferte as well.
Oh, that's how about you, Tom? What are you listening to?
Me?
Yeah.
One of my favorite songs is called Man Smart, Women Are Smarter. And you all have demonstrated that in absolute spades today. Anybody who knows me knows I'm a Grateful Dead fan. That's one of my favorite all-time Dead songs. Cover by Dead, not written originally.
Right.
That's what I'm listening to.
And what about where you go for new music? Did you?
You asking me or Jessica?
Jessica?
Oh, sorry. Where do I don't leave this room.
Yeah, good point.
But where do I go for new music? Oh, you mean to like discover new music? I thought you meant concerts, which I would love to go to a concert. I'm actually going to go see Gang of Four next month. Where do I discover new music? I do a lot of, I don't love a lot of the discovery things on different platforms. I feel like they don't know my tastes very well. And so I would love to be able to use that, because I love the idea of like you're cooking and then all of a sudden you're hearing new stuff that you hadn't heard before, but I haven't had much luck with that. I think I tend to, we actually have a Slack channel for the Audio Shake team where people are throwing in different things. And
that's awesome.
Like got one guy who does a lot of lo-fi, and another who throws in we've got one guy who's, I feel like, is trolling us a bit, and it's a ton of Euro dance. Mm-hmm. But that's a fun way because everyone listens to different stuff.
Right. I've been watching a lot of TV lately because I've been immobile with a bad foot. And anyway, I've been watching this a series called Better Things, which I'd never watched before, created by Pam Adlon. And I've discovered so many new songs that I love. So it's like the soundtrack to this, series that has essentially been my music discovery for the last week. It's amazing. Anyway, I highly recommend it. All right, Tom, I think we're up.
Well, I regret that we are up, but this has been fascinating. And David Hazen, you proved once again you can deliver the two smartest people clearly in the room, and maybe in the two smartest people that I've ever met. So thank you, ladies, for bringing your wisdom, bringing your charm. Jessica, you've got a great story unfolding, and I'm delighted that you are where you are and where you're heading, and it's going to be fun to watch. To the audience, thank you for your attention. Please keep coming back every Thursday. And in the meantime, stay safe, healthy, and get a flipping shot immediately.
Immediately.
With that, folks, stay safe and healthy. Thanks.
Take care. Thank you.
Thanks.